That Christmas, I worked a double shift in the ER. While I was gone, my parents and sister told my 16-year-old daughter there wasn't a place for her at their dinner table. She ended up driving back on her own and spending Christmas night in an empty, silent house. I didn't argue. I chose to act instead. By the next morning, my parents found a letter on their doorstep and immediately started shouting. On Christmas Eve, I dragged myself home just before midnight, worn out. Hours earlier, I'd been pressing down on a man's chest, trying to keep him alive, while he insisted he was simply tired, though his lips were already turning blue. That was the kind of shift I'd had. So when I noticed Abby's boots by the door, my gut reaction was that something must have happened. Then I saw her coat thrown carelessly over the chair, her overnight bag untouched, and her body curled on the couch in that uneasy position, as if she didn't quite trust it to hold her. I stood there, waiting for the pieces to fit together. She was supposed to be at my parents' for their usual Christmas Eve sleepover. This year she had begged to drive herself, her first Christmas with her license, eager to prove she could handle the responsibility. She'd even left early to be respectful. Since both my husband and I were working late, the plan made perfect sense until it suddenly didn't. "Abby," I whispered. Her eyes snapped open like she hadn't been asleep at all. "Hey," she said softly. "Why are you home?" She straightened slowly. "They said there wasn't room for me." I frowned. "Room? Where exactly?" "At the table." Her voice cracked halfway through, and she tried to cover it with a shrug, but it didn't hide the hurt. "They told me they weren't expecting me. Too many people were already seated. Grandma said she couldn't just squeeze in another chair last minute." She looked annoyed, like I was making things harder for her. "But you were on time." "Yeah, exactly on time." She let out a hollow laugh. Grandma opened the door and stared at me, like I'd wandered into the wrong house. Abby paused, then went on. "She also said there wasn't a bed left. That was excuse number 2. She said they didn't want me driving late at night, but also couldn't figure out where I'd sleep, so I just left." I blinked at her. "No one offered to drive you back?" Did they even let you eat?" Another shrug. The table was packed. Lily was sitting in my usual spot. Grandpa was laughing with her like she was the guest of honor. Nobody really looked my way. Then Grandma said, "It's just a crowded year." And Aunt Janelle agreed. So I left. Her eyes shifted to the coffee table. I made toast. I followed her glance. There it was, a single slice of toast on a paper towel. It was stiff and cold with half a banana next to it. That was her Christmas dinner. Something twisted in my chest. Not fury yet, but the brittle, icy ache that comes right before the snap. "I wasn't even that hungry," she whispered. "Not really." That's when her eyes started to fill. "He fought it." God, she tried, looked up, blinked hard, bit her lip like she could chew her way out of the emotion they made. "It seemed like I'd imposed," she whispered, "like showing up after it was planned was rude." And then she cried, quiet and slow, like a faucet. "You can't quite turn off. I was going to bring a pie," she added, "but I thought they'd have enough food already." I sat next to her, put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned in without hesitation. like she'd been holding herself up spite after a while. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I know they don't like you," she said. But I thought she cut herself off. "You thought you were just the kid, not part of it." She nodded. "They didn't even say it meanly," she added, just like it was a practical problem, like I was a folding chair. They didn't have space, for I didn't go to bed right away. I sat in the kitchen, looking at her bag still zipped. She packed it so carefully, picked out the sweater my mom said she liked. Brought a little tin of cookies she made herself. I opened the fridge. There was nothing special in there. We hadn't planned a backup Christmas. Why would we? We trusted them. That's the part one couldn't get over. Not the cold cheese toast or the lack of food. Not even that. She drove home alone in the dark. It's that they looked her in the eyes. The sweet, awkward, brave girl who showed up on time with cookies and a smile and told her with 28 people inside, "There's no room for you." They didn't mean no space, they meant not you. The following morning, my husband came home while Abby was still asleep. I explained what had happened. He stood silently for a long moment before finally asking, "So what do we do now?" I didn't answer. Not right then, but deep down, I already knew. There's a difference between turning the other cheek and turning away a 16-year-old who only wanted to feel included. They chose the latter. I didn't create a scene. I responded with action. That next morning, my parents discovered a letter waiting at their doorstep, and the shouting began. I can't quite recall the first time someone called me the weird one. Probably happened before I even understood what the word meant. When I was 6, I found a dead bird and asked if I could dissect it. Not because I was trying to be creepy, but because I genuinely wanted to see how it worked. My mom slapped her palm against the kitchen counter and snapped, "Jesus, Kate, what's wrong with you?" My sister Janelle screamed and immediately told everyone I was trying to create a zombie. I ended up grounded for scaring her. That pretty much set the tone. I adored anatomy books, asked for a microscope one Christmas, and talked about blood flow during dinner. At school, I was the kid who actually raised her hand in class. And in my family, that was all it took to earn the label of show-off. No one else in the family pursued college. Most didn't even finish high school on their first attempt. I was the only one studying during commercial breaks. By the time I was 12, my dad had started joking, half joking, that I wasn't really his. To be mine, he'd say, you'd have to like beer and hate books. Then let out a chuckle. Once I overheard him arguing with my mom late at night. They thought I was asleep. He asked if she'd ever cheated on him. Said he always had doubts because I didn't resemble anyone else in the family. That night, I hardly slept. I never brought it up. Still haven't. By the time we reached high school, Janelle had fully embraced her role as the golden child. She was loud, charming, and average in her grades, but a master at spinning every setback into a story people loved hearing. She could cry on cue and made a point of telling everyone she looked out for her poor, awkward sister, who just didn't get jokes. She used to call me Doctor, freak in front of anyone who'd listen. When I actually became a doctor, she started calling me Doctor. Moneybags. So some progress, I guess. When I landed the full-ride scholarship, my parents barely reacted. No cheering, no embrace. My mom just asked who I thought I'd end up marrying since guys apparently don't like women who outshine them. I told her maybe I'd marry myself. She didn't laugh. They never gave me a dime. I waited tables all through med school, took the graveyard shifts no one wanted, came home with blistered feet and burnout etched deep into my bones. But to my family, I was living the dream. They never once came to visit. Years later, after finishing my second residency, I finally secured my first stable job. The one that made me feel for the first time like I wasn't just trying to keep from drowning. My husband and I met during an overnight shift. Very romantic if you find shared exhaustion romantic. And eventually moved to a place where we could afford more than instant noodles. And that's when the call started. Can you help with the electric bill? Can you co-sign this lease? Can you talk to a doctor friend about Uncle Pete's back lump? I did what I could, most of it without hesitation. When my parents were approaching retirement way too early, and with zero savings, I stepped in. They'd never owned a home, always rented bad credit, bad luck, whatever the excuse of the year was. So I bought a modest 2-bedroom house and handed them the keys. I told them it was a gift, that I'd handle the mortgage. The house is in my name, but they live there, like it's theirs. Rentry utilities covered more often than not. Medical stuff. I have insurance access. Yes? I never said no until recently, a few months ago. Janelle called Lily. Her daughter, the one who can do no wrong, had been accepted into a prestigious STEM summer camp. She's got your brain. Janelle said, like it was a compliment. This could change her life. I asked how much one. 200, she said. But it's worth it. And you, of all people. That's where I stopped listening. Abby never went to a summer camp like that. Not because she couldn't. She just never asked. She's practical, thoughtful. She wouldn't dream of demanding that kind of money from me, even though she could have. I told Janelle, no politely, but firmly. I said I was already covering our parents' mortgage, medical bills, and emergencies, that maybe she could apply for financial aid or a payment plan. Her tone turned fast. Wow, must be nice to have everything and still be so stingy. She's your niece. You're just jealous because Lily's actually going places. That last one was funny. Or would have been if I hadn't heard my mum mutter something similar. A week later, when she thought I was out of earshot. Apparently, I was holding Lily back, just like I always held Janelle back, by being the smart one who made everyone else look bad. You know, by existing, I didn't fight. It didn't explain, didn't justify. I just said no, and I meant it. That was 3 weeks before Christmas. Abby was excited to go to Christmas dinner. Said she felt grown up being trusted to drive there herself. She packed an overnight bag and even wrapped little presents for the younger cousins. I told her I'd see her in the morning and reminded her to text when she arrived. She did everything. Seemed fine. Hours later, I stepped through our front door and discovered fine had apparently been cancelled. Abby looked up from the couch with a wobbly smile that said, "Please pretend this isn't a disaster." She told me in the smallest voice that Grandma had murmured, no space at the table or anywhere else. even though she counted 28 chairs in use. A math problem with only one variable, her. I listened. I let her explanation thud around the room like a dropped suitcase. Then I wrapped my arms around her and let the quiet do the talking. She fell asleep, still wearing the sweater she'd picked out to impress them. When the house finally settled, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where her Christmas dinner should have been. I replayed every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every just this once. Katie, that had become forever. They hadn't run out of room, they'd run out of gratitude, and they'd used my daughter to send the memo. That was the moment the switch flipped. No more explanations, no more polite negotiations. I didn't even bother deciding if I'd act only how soon. We didn't speak much on the drive over. My husband sat beside me in silence, his hand resting lightly on my knee, like a grounding wire. Not comforting exactly, just solid present. That was enough. The morning after Christmas always has that weird, fuzzy quiet, like the world still hung over on sugar and wrapping paper. I was just hoping the house would be empty. It wasn't. There were still 2 extra cars in the driveway. I recognized one as Janelle's. The other probably belonged to whatever cousin had stayed late for leftovers. We got out. I held the envelope tight. I hadn't slept the shift. The scene with Abby, the cold dinner tray on the counter that still hadn't been cleaned up. It was all humming in the back of my brain like a blown fuse. I rang the bell. Waited. No one came. I rang again. Knocked. Nothing. Let's just leave it, my husband said gently. I stood there a second longer, then nodded. We walked back toward the car. I tugged the envelope carefully against the door frame, but it wouldn't blow away. I was opening the driver's side door when I heard it. The creak of the screen, a slippered footstep. I turned. My mother stepped out, wrapped in one of those fuzzy robes she always wore during the holidays, the kind she used to brag about getting for 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it, and started reading. Her face went blank, then pale. Then she screamed, "Frank!" Her voice cracked like a snapped wire. "Frank, get out here! She's throwing us out!" My dad appeared at the door in yesterday's clothes. "What the hell?" Janelle followed, still in her Christmas pajamas, clutching a mug, like she thought this was going to be a cozy morning. "What's going on?" My mom turned and pointed down the driveway, like I was a stray animal that had just pissed on her porch. "You ungrateful little..." We got in the car and pulled away before I could catch the full sentence. Didn't matter. I knew the greatest hits. By the time we got home, my phone was already buzzing. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. The 6th time I picked up. "How dare you?" My mom shrieked. No hello, no pause, not even a fake concern for Abby. "You've lost your damn mind." I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear my dad yelling in the background, "If you do this, you're no daughter of ours," he bellowed. They didn't ask why. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't even mention Abby. Not once I hung up. They kept calling Janelle, started texting. I think one message actually said, "This is going to ruin your reputation. Think of your career." Oh, honey. My patients don't care where my parents live by evening. My phone looked like it had gone through a breakup. 32 missed calls, 14 texts, 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the nerve to message. Not my place, but this feels extreme. You only get one mom? I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. Of course, my mother. She was standing on my porch in that same fuzzy robe, holding the eviction letter, now crumpled and damp, like she'd been squeezing it for 2 hours straight. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. She didn't wait. "You're really doing this?" she hissed, "after everything we've done for you." I let that hang for a second. Then I said quietly, "You mean the house I bought for you? The bills I paid? The health coverage I arranged because your Medicare didn't cover your blood pressure meds?" She flinched for a millisecond. Then she straightened, eyes sharp. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You didn't even let my daughter eat dinner," I said. That stopped her briefly, but she recovered fast. "Don't be dramatic. We didn't have enough chairs." "There were 28 people there," I said. "Even a neighbor," her lips pressed tight. "I didn't send that letter to be cruel," I added. "But if you think you can treat Abby like she's disposable—" "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped suddenly, animated again. "Stop acting like we're monsters. You're the one tearing your family apart over a misunderstanding. And now you're threatening your own parents." She held up the letter like it was evidence in a trial. Then, and I swear this part felt like theater. She ripped it in half, just stood there, and tore it down the center, like that would somehow void the legal process. "There," she said. "That's done now. If you want us to forgive you, you'll pay for Lily Science Camp and drop this ridiculous tantrum." She smiled, like she just solved the whole thing. I didn't say anything because that was the moment I realized they hadn't taken me seriously. Not for a second. Not when I was a kid. Not when I became a doctor. Not even now to them. I was still the awkward, science-obsessed girl who should be grateful for scraps and stay in her place. The girl they resented, but never truly respected. They thought I wouldn't follow through. But they were wrong. So I let my mother walk off the porch, muttering to herself like the hero in a tragic play. And I closed the door, quietly, calmly. But in my head, I was already making the next move. My mother tore up the eviction letter like it was a flyer for gutter cleaning, right in front of me, right after accusing me of being selfish, loveless, and emotionally unstable. Then she had the nerve to smile and say, "Pay for Lily Science Camp and we'll forgive you." She said, "We'll forgive you." Like they were the victims, like turning away my daughter. At Christmas was some sort of lapse in etiquette instead of cruelty. 2 mornings later, I met with the lawyer. I laid everything out. The house in my name, the mortgage I'd been paying for 7 years, the bills, the dental plan, the quiet sacrifices. He didn't flinch. "I assume you want a formal eviction?" he said. "Like it was the weather." I nodded. The notice went out that same week. 60 days paper, stamped, signature acquired. And this time, they couldn't tear it up and pretend it didn't exist. I kept paying. The mortgage wasn't about to let my credit die for the sake of a statement. But everything else gone. Utilities, cable, medical reimbursements. They got a crash course in what no support actually looks like. 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my door. It was Aunt Elaine, the good aunt. Or so I'd thought. She had a tin of cookies and a rehearsed look of concern. "Kate," she said, "I just want to talk." I let her in. I already knew why she was there. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "It just doesn't sound like you," she started. "There was throwing out your parents over a misunderstanding," she added gently. I laughed once, not kindly. I told her about the house, the bills, the Christmas Eve betrayal, how my parents had made room for 28 people, including a neighbor and 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, but not their own granddaughter. Aunt Elaine paused. "I didn't know." "She said they didn't tell you," I corrected. She left like someone who couldn't unhear what they'd heard. 3 days later, I got a text I didn't understand. Before I do now, 1 week before the deadline, my lawyer called. "They haven't moved at all." He said, "Then we proceed," I responded. That same day, I put the house on the market, priced it fairly, not inflated. I wasn't looking to squeeze out every dollar. I just wanted to be done. A buyer made an offer quickly. Families love that neighborhood. They only had one condition. The place needed to be completely vacated. Vacant possession required, my agent reminded me. "Understood," I said. I didn't go on the day they were removed. The new owners handled it through official legal processes. From what I heard, it wasn't pleasant, but what followed wasn't any easier. Janelle, of course, welcomed them in. Naturally, my sister has always liked playing the role of the more compassionate one. She spoke to the cousins as if she were giving some kind of press interview. "She's walking away from them," she declared, all because of one misunderstanding at Christmas. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my front door. Her eyes were red, her hair pulled into a messy bun that looked like it hadn't been touched all day. "I can't handle it," she blurted out, skipping any kind of hello. "They won't stop fighting. Mom complains the living room is too crowded. Dad says my kids are too noisy. They won't even agree on using the bathroom. I'm losing it." I leaned on the doorway, arms crossed. "They need to find a rental," she said firmly. "You could at least help with the deposit, just enough to get them started." "No, Janelle, you stood by when they turned Abby away on Christmas Eve and did nothing. That was your decision." I gave a small nod. "This is mine." She stared for a moment, hesitated, then turned and walked away, without another word. 1 week later, she put them out too. They landed in a rental nobody would brag about, 2 cramped rooms, a single space heater, and a front step that sagged like it was giving up. Their pensions barely stretched to cover rent and groceries. The vacations were over, the dinner parties gone, the anniversary cruise they had once dreamed of forgotten. They began reaching out to the extended family, hoping to stir sympathy. They claimed I had abandoned them, called me unstable, cold, said I had always been that way. But by then, I had already spoken quietly with the uncles and cousins. I sent proof, scanned receipts of bills I'd covered, a certified copy of the eviction letter with a timestamp. One cousin simply wrote back, "Wow." Another just sent a thumbs-up emoji. No one rushed in to rescue them, and neither did I. 2 months later, Abby and I sat on the porch together, sipping iced tea. No plans, no pretending, just a calm afternoon. You know, she said, I don't even miss them. Neither did I. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Without thinking, I opened it. Hope you're proud of yourself. I deleted it instantly. No pause, no reaction. They'll text again, Abby said casually. They always do, I answered. But they're not my burden anymore. And I meant it. They once claimed there wasn't space for Abby at their table. Now there's no space in our lives for cruelty, control, or manipulation. Fast forward 2 years, they're still in that rundown rental, still blaming everyone but themselves. Abby, she's thriving, studying exactly what she loves. The money from the house sale did more than pay for tuition. It gave her peace, and it gave me a piece of closure. I don't answer their calls. I don't send support. I don't lose sleep. I protected my daughter. I chose her finally. But tell me this. Did I go too far, or just far enough? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to